Good morning, Neighborhood Friends Church. So happy to have everyone. Can you all stand with us in worship? Whether you're in the sanctuary or at home, we're so excited to actually get started here.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing Your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. You're rich in love and You're slow to anger. Your name is great and Your heart is kind. For all Your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul will sing Your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, my soul. I worship Your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I worship Your holy name. Yes, I worship Your holy name.
Well, good morning, everyone. How y'all doing? We're just gonna continue in worship. So, yeah, let's do this thing.
Oh, your 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May His presence go before you and behind you, all around you, and within you. He is with you, He is with you. In the morning, in the evening, in your coming, in your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, 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 He is for you. May His favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family, and your children, and their children, and their children. May His presence go before you and behind you and beside you, all around you and within you. He is with you, He is with you. In the morning, in the evening, in your coming, and your going, in your weeping and rejoicing. He is for you, 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 He is for you.
Amen. Amen. Yes, amen. Amen. The Lord bless you and keep you. Make His face shine upon you. Be gracious to you. Lord, turn His face toward you and give you peace.
Amen. You guys go ahead and take a seat.
Good morning. I am so incredibly, totally excited to be actually gathered in person with you guys. And to those of you online, welcome. We love you. I am just pumped to be here at Neighborhood. Like, I don't have words. I'm a little, jittery. We have a few announcements, and those have to do with, just some of the safety things that we're currently implementing. Wearing your mask from the street to your seat, from your seat to outside again, making sure you're sanitizing your hands, whether you brought your own sanitizer or there are some in the welcome areas and by the offering box at the back of the room. Those are just, typical things in this season of our life, so just make sure you're aware of those things. Let's see, what else? Oh, we're having a picnic afterwards. So it's a bring your own picnic, which means we can go out on the lawn and just hang out at whatever social distance you're comfortable with. I'm so excited to just get to be with you and to see your faces out there as well this morning when we finish inside. Neighborhood kids. Just in case you didn't notice, our kids are present in the room. They will continue to be present in the room this morning and next week for certain. Be checking online, check the website, and we'll have updates as far as that goes when our children's leaders have an update for us, when we know when we will actually start having children's ministries downstairs again as well. Our live stream 5K giving is still happening. Now, we've said before, we met that initial goal to keep us live streaming on Sunday mornings as we've regathered in person, to continue to put out a live stream to those that are more comfortable staying home. Now, we met that initial goal. We're sitting at about $6,300, which is amazing and God-given, and I cannot get over it. But here's the thing. We can raise a little more and do even more and reach more people, and it's about quality, and it's about connection, and that connection here in our facility and our connection to those that are watching online. So continue to give towards that. All of your prayer, connection, sign me up cards, you'll notice those are no longer in the seats in front or behind you. So you'll still want to go online to the website, and all of those links are underneath our online services. So your giving, your YouVersion app, all of those links that you've been using recently, because we are still trying to be as touch-free as possible. So go there, do what you need to do, sign on to the Bible app for Pastor Donnie's sermon notes this morning, and just really enjoy as Pastor Donnie comes to us to talk about how we're having a house party.
I'm speaking to an iPhone. Am I on? I am, yeah. It is, like somebody just asked me this morning, like, how you feeling? Are you excited to speak to people again? I'm actually nervous because there's humans in the room again. It's like crazy. It's like, wow, there's real life humans out there. I can't believe it. It's amazing. But yeah, as Katie said, it is a party. It feels a little bit like a party, doesn't it? Feel like a reunion, maybe a birthday bash. It feels a little anticlimactic in some ways because you're all at 6 feet distance. Everybody's walking in with masks. We're not built for that, are we? How many of you realize that over the last 12, 14 weeks, that human relationships are incredibly important? And that FaceTime just doesn't seem to do it, does it? And although we are doing our best to follow these guidelines and to follow what the state is asking us to do as a church, our job is not to be rule followers. Our job is to be people that care for people. That's our job. That's what God does for us. That's exactly what Jesus did for us, is that Jesus would actually create an atmosphere within a community of people where it wasn't about self, it was about selfless. It was about living for the person next to you. It was about doing whatever I have to do, even if it's uncomfortable, to live for you. That is the life of Jesus. Thank goodness. How many of you are excited for Jesus? I mean, are you just excited to be together today? I mean, isn't that awesome? It's great. It's wonderful. But how many of you came and said, you know, I'm just excited to celebrate Jesus with my family? That's what this is all about. So there's a lot happening in our world. In fact, some ways I just want to stand up and start singing YMCA or something. Or, you know, I feel like we need a disco ball in the room and we need some cake and all kinds of stuff afterwards. It feels like a little bit like a reception. At least that's what I was anticipating. And there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in our world. A lot happening even here right now. And as I think about it, the old normal that we used to have is probably never going to be back to the new normal. There is a new normal. And it won't be what we had before. It's going to be different. And my fear is that everything that we have found to be really good and true during COVID will get lost once again when everything gets opened up again. And here's what I believe the church's job is moving forward. Building relationships. That's what it was all about in the first place. And when we get back to that, when we get back to building community, when we get back to building friendships, when we get back to building up the person next to us, the church will flourish in its original intention. My fear is that the busyness is going to come back, and it will, and the craziness will come back, and it will. Running around, going nuts, like getting up in the morning, feel like you're coming home in the late afternoon and feel like you're so tired and exhausted. And how many of you are feeling that already as things start to open up a little? We can't lose the art of what it means to be in support of one another, because we're going to be tired again. But my hope is things that we learned will stay, like family walks. How many of you learned how to cook in the last 14 weeks? Right? Like, you learned how to make coffee. You're not actually going to Starbucks or to Sweet Bloom every time to get it. Now, we want to support them, but, right, you're learning how to make drinks at home and food at home and breakfast at home. And my house has been loaded with all kinds of, like, goodies all the time. These two on the front row have been baking like crazy lately. But the parks, going for walks, riding bikes, doing whatever it is that we need to do to be together, I hope those things stay. I hope those things continue. Is that my phone? No. I have that ring. But as things are coming back, there's certain things that are coming back that we really, really love, like shopping, the malls, going to sporting events, kids' sporting events, parks and sports and all those things. Old Town Arvada's kind of open up. How many of you have been to Old Town now that they shut down Main Street and they put tables out? You know what that reminds me of? Italy. That's exactly what happens in Italy. They just shut the streets down and they put tables out in the middle of the cobblestone streets and everybody eats together. It's beautiful. So support those local businesses. Be a part of it. But one thing that I love that is back, I really love, is soccer. No love for soccer in the room. Yes! And guess who is champions of the EPL? Liverpool Reds. Yep. Once again, we are champs. It is awesome. It's so good, right? Like, soccer's back, but if you are in any other part of the world other than the United States, it's not called soccer. What's it called? Football. Not to be confused with the NFL, right? But it is... Soccer is very different in America than it is in any other part of the world. Just watch an MLS game and watch an EPL game. They're very different sports. And what's amazing about that is even though they look the same, even though they look a lot the same, the rules are the same, the field dimensions are the same, there's a goal, there's a ball, you can't touch the ball with your hands, otherwise you'll get a penalty, right? Those are the things, like, all the rules look the same. But trying to explain English Premier Soccer to somebody who's only seen Pee Wee soccer in America is a very difficult task. Now, you're asking, why in the world would I say that? Because trying to explain what I think we're supposed to do here is very different than what it looks like at any other church. It looks a lot the same. We sing songs. There's this guy who's got a bald head and he gets up and preaches. There's plenty of those guys out there everywhere, right? We have children's ministry. We have youth ministry. We have a lot of things that look like every other church out there. But you know what makes this church unique? This. You. Us. There's no other church like us. Although we act very much like other churches, trying to explain this church to somebody who's never been to this church is like trying to explain the EPL, the football, to somebody who's only seen soccer. And the reason why they're different is because the way professional soccer players in England play, they play differently. They play with a sense of space, not 6 feet space. But they understand space. They understand each other. They understand where each other's at. They know exactly the strategies that they're supposed to go through in order to score goals and defend their own goal. They work together. They are a team. And I think that that's the difference between us and any other church. I hope moving forward that we will use our space, not as the space, but space for us to build relationships, space for us to create an opportunity to get to know one another. Because it's really not about a length of the service or a time frame that we start or all this video production stuff or a great tight band or a great speaker. It's about community. If we don't have community, then all of that just becomes production. So I want to talk to you this morning about what makes us unique as a church. And so we're in this series in Philippians, but we're going to kind of take a break from Philippians for 1 week. And here's why. Because Paul learned something when he was in ministry from Jesus that we need to learn why Jesus loved community so much. Paul was taught by Christ. And so what we learned in quarantine is that it's not about the building, that it's not about entertainment, it's not about the looks, it's not about all those things. It's about embracing relationship and being together. And that is what is most important about today, is that we are together again. And it taught me over the last 14 weeks or so to posture my own life and to posture my pastoral life toward you, toward people, toward each other, and that we would posture ourselves toward people that we wouldn't normally see. It's not just about who's in the room, it's who's outside of the room. It's about who's in the room so that we can better leverage our resources for who's outside the room. Because the party that's here was not intended to be exclusive. It was intended to be inclusive. It was intended to be a party that we invite everybody to. It would be a party that yesterday when the one person who started the $1,000 gift giving for the 5K live streaming to get that going, he told me yesterday, he said, Donnie, I just hope that $1,000 just reaches thousands of people. That's why I gave it. That's why I started it. He didn't start it so we could have a cool production team. He started it so that the gospel go out because he believes in the party. He believes in what happens here. He believes in that what happens here is intended to go out to the world that desperately needs that life. So I want to talk to you this morning about being the life of the party. What does it mean to be the life of the party? Anybody been known as that person as being the life of the party? That would be me. Anybody else? Felt like you were always told, oh, he's totally the life of the party. I was the life of the party, but you know what it ended up being for me more than anything? Shameful. Because life of the party to the world is very different than being the life of the party to Jesus. Being the life of the party to the world is that I put myself out there and that I do everything I can to get attention, that I do everything I can to get your allegiance and your kindness and your generosity and get popularity and all those things. But the way that Jesus actually became the life of the party wasn't the way that anybody else becomes the life of the party. He became the life of the party through humility, through service. Jesus is the life of the party, but he's not just the life of the party, he's the life in this party. He's the only life in this party. He's the only one that brings life to this party. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for Jesus today. When I was a kid growing up as a pastor's son, I felt like I knew what the church was all about. When you're a pastor's kid, you think you know everything about the church. In fact, you not only think you know everything about the church, you feel like the church building's yours. You own it. It becomes our football field. It becomes everything to us. It becomes our playground. It became our life, right? I knew how many rafters were in the ceiling of Plainview Friends Church. I knew how many steps were in the foyer of Cottonwood Falls in our church in Kansas. I knew I knew Lillian Mock's favorite hymn was on page 68, and it was called Streams of Living Water. I knew everything. I knew that if my dad got up and spoke on a Sunday and he said something like this, I just want to preach from my heart, I knew that he wasn't prepared. I knew, and that's why I'm speaking from my heart this morning, because I'm not prepared, right? I just learned from my dad. But the truth is, I knew everything about the church until I got into my teenage years and I realized I didn't know anything about Jesus. I knew everything about a building and I knew everything about what happened, but I knew nothing about Christ. And I started my own search, and it was a secret search because I didn't want anybody else to know that I was searching for something that I thought that I already knew. And I didn't like talking to anybody about Christ, and I didn't want them to talk to me about Christ because I knew more than they did. And then when they would talk to me, I realized I didn't know more than they did. And it was a big, huge game. And I think sometimes we often misdiagnose what is most important in life and what is most important in the church. We come up with all kinds of theological perspectives. You can go to the bookstore and you can find all kinds of books. Row after row. We don't have bookstores anymore. If you go to Amazon and look for Christian books, you'll find page after page, right, of Christian books. Things that talk about things like apologetics and hermeneutics and constructive theology, deconstructive theology, postmodernism, moral theology, systematic theology, eschatology, all kinds of stuff. And you know what? None of those things matter to anybody who's just searching for hope. They might matter later on in their life, but they don't matter to somebody who's broken and hurting. And those aren't the things that matter the most. It's as if sometimes I think we're trying to solve faith rather than just live by faith. We're not in the business of trying to solve it. We're in the business of living by it, with each other and for each other, and asking the same questions, because you know what everybody in this room has asked. It's the same question I've asked. Does my life have any significance? Does my life have any purpose? Does your life matter? And if my life matters and your life matters, then how do they matter together, and how do we accomplish something collectively that's going to impact our world? So in the book of Philippians, we have Paul, who has been writing letters to this church of Philippi, 850 miles away from a prison cell. And in Acts 16, Paul is in a prison cell with his buddy Silas, and he has a party. He just has a party. Starts singing worship songs in a prison cell. They're proclaiming the name of Jesus. They're just having a great time, singing old VBS songs together, or hymns that they learned when they were kids, and brand new Hillsong songs that they're singing together in the room. And suddenly there's an earthquake, and the church comes out of this. This church of Philippi starts from this moment, from tragedy, from quarantine, from a prison. And now Paul is encouraging that church of Philippi from Rome, from a Roman prison cell 850 miles away. And I asked the question the other day, how did Paul become so optimistic about his joy? How did he become so optimistic about the future of the church when he's sitting in a prison cell multiple times after many beatings and all kinds of things? Because his example was Christ. His example was Jesus. Jesus was Paul's life. Jesus was the very one that brought life to Paul. And Jesus was the very one that brought life through Paul. His entire life was centered around Jesus. So I want to talk to you just for a few moments here about what I call the theology of life of the party. Because that's what this really is. It's the theology of the life of the party. Jesus has a life of the party theology and mission in the world. His job is to bring joy to people who don't have it. And you know what religion does? Religion sucks the life out of the party. Jesus fills the party with his joy and with his love and with his purpose. Jesus was all about the party. He was all about laughter. How many of you think that laughter in the church should be something we should experience often? You suddenly got really morose, quiet. So I'm going to ask you, go ahead and start laughing. Just do it. Come on. None of this fake stuff, do it. Let everybody out there that's listening and watching hear you. Laugh. Doesn't it feel good? Like this is what it feels like. This is keep laughing. Keep doing it. Everybody's laughing. Everybody's having a good time. It's a party. And then Jesus just shows up and says, stop it. Stop. You see, that's what religion does. Religion in the middle of your party comes in and says, stop. God is to be honored, not laughed at. No, God is to be laughed with because he's honored. That is who he is. The big idea for this morning is really this. If you want to follow Jesus, if you want to follow in his footsteps, there's two things you better get used to. Eating a lot and walking a lot. That's what he did. Jesus ate a lot and walked a lot. In other words, here's the biggest idea for this morning. If you want to live like Jesus, eat with people and walk with people. Be careful how you say that. Eat people and walk with them. Eat with people and walk with them. There is a level of discipleship and relationship that happens when we sit around a table together. So it's more than just this. If we aren't sitting around tables together, then this just becomes often more about entertainment. So today we're starting with a picnic. But I pray that that is our future. That we're sitting around a table and we're eating together and we're having parties together and we're laughing together, because nothing we know about Jesus in the current life that we worship him and see him and know him through scriptures, nothing that we know about Jesus falls out of the context of relationship. It's always in the context of relationship. Everything he did was about relationship. In fact, his very first miracle that he did was at the wedding at Cana. He performed a miracle at a wedding. Anybody know what the miracle was? No, the miracle was people. See, because that's how we do it. We go, oh, it's the first miracle of turning water into wine. It was basically his statement of saying, people matter more to me than anything. In fact, I will take water and turn it into wine so that somebody will not be shamed. This is the love of Jesus, is that he is out for your joy, not to shame you. And yet so often we walk into a church setting and we think that God's out to get me. No, he's not out to get you. He's out to get you so that he can give you joy. He's out to get you so he can bring you some laughter and some hope and some peace. So there's this one time that Jesus is at a party. And this is where I get my theology of the life of the party. It's Luke chapter 14, so we're taking a break from Philippians for 1 week, starting with verse 7, and I'm gonna flow through this. So I don't have a ton here this morning because I wanted to be more free to just kind of give you what I felt that the Lord was given to me in the moment. So verse 7, when Jesus noticed that all who had come to the dinner were trying to sit in the seats of honor near the head of the table, he gave them this advice. Now, noticed. You know what Jesus notices? All of us, all the time. When Jesus walks into a room, like even right now, when he would walk in, if he were to walk into this room before this service ever started, I guarantee he would do what we call work the room, but his way of working the room was much different than ours. His way of working the room was looking at relationships. He would look at faces. He would see who's hurting. He would see who is actually in conversation. He'd see who isn't in conversation. And more often, he's drawn to the person who's not in conversation, wondering how he can engage them in conversation. But what Jesus also notices is that the people who are out for themselves, the people who are out to sit at the top table, sit at the best seat, spiritually, Jesus is just looking for people who want to bring life to the party, not just people who are trying to suck life out of the party for themselves. Have you ever been to a party that had no name tags at the tables? Maybe a wedding reception and you walk in and it's almost confusing because you don't know where you're supposed to sit. And you end up sitting at the head of the table next to the groom, and you don't know why you're sitting there. Who's done that? Don't do that. I hope nobody's done that. I've never even done that, and I'm not that bright. But when you walk into the room and there's no name tags, everybody's wanting to know where they're supposed to be sitting. And so rather than figure that out, we will go through the room and we will start measuring up people. We'll start working the room to find out who's most important, who's got the power, who's popular, who's got the conversations, who's getting the conversations, who's in friendship, who's not in friendship. And see, Jesus sees it very differently than we do. He sees it from a perspective of who's lonely, but he also sees it from a perspective of who's humble. Who's going to walk into the room and be for the person next to them? He teaches them that there are people in the room who are nervous and insecure, but there's also people who are searching for power and popularity. There's people walking in the room just looking for a date. and he knows you, and he sees you. He teaches them in this moment the proper life of theology party, what it means to be in the party theology. Verses 8 and 9, he says, when you were invited, so he's going to teach them now. He sees what's going on, and he says, now let me teach you. When you were invited to a wedding feast, don't sit at the seat of honor. What if someone who is more distinguished than you also has been invited? The host will come and say, give this person your seat. Then you will be embarrassed, and you will have to take whatever seat is left at the foot of the table. He's saying, wherever you go in life, whenever you go in life, however you go in life, if you go with a mission to serve, you will never be shamed. You see, Jesus is not trying to shame us. He's actually trying to move us away from shame. He's in this moment saying, I'm concerned for you so much that I want to protect you from yourself, your own selfish ambitions. I remember in 1987, I went to an Angels baseball game in the middle of the week. I ditched school. Yes, I did, Mom and Dad. I ditched school with my friend Phil Amador, and we went to a baseball game in the middle of the day. We're at this Angels game, and we're sitting in the nosebleed section at the very top. And we look down, and Phil's looking at the club level, and there's nobody in the club level. And he looks at me and goes, are you thinking what I'm thinking? I'm like, I'm thinking what you're thinking. Let's go down, sit in the club level. There's nobody there. We made our way to club level. We went past some security guards, somehow made ourselves available all the way down to the edge of club level so we could see this game. And we're sitting there, and about the second inning, no joke, Pat Sajak taps on my shoulder. Do you know who Pat Sajak is? Wheel of Fortune guy. He taps on my shoulder, and I looked up at him, and I said, hi, Pat. And my buddy Phil goes, okay, you can have him back then. And he stands up, and Phil just looks at him, pats him on the back, and goes, nice to meet you, Pat. And we were so embarrassed in some ways, but yet we were having a blast because we were just out for ourselves. But in this moment, I was incredibly ashamed of where I was sitting. I was incredibly ashamed that I would be in that place and I would just bend the rules to find myself in a position of power, authority, in a place that I never purchased for myself. And he's saying, be humble. He said, don't do that. Be humble, be gentle, be generous. And he says, instead, take the lowest place at the foot of the table. I love this. Then your host sees you. He will come and say, friend, we have a better place for you. Then you'll be honored in front of all the other guests. And this is what he says. This is the key passage for this entire parable. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. In Jesus' life of the party theology, the alternative of chosen humility is the inheritance of shame. You see, what I looked at it and I thought, okay, he's saying exalt themselves. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled. That's humbled in a bad way, but those who humble themselves by their choice will be exalted. We can be humble and be exalted, or we can exalt ourselves and find ourselves humiliated. The pathway of joy takes on this pathway of literally a posture of serving. If we're not serving, if we're not in the posture of serving, we're never going to walk with Jesus, because that's Jesus's pathway. It's always serving. It's always humility. He worked the room. And then in verse 12 it says, and then he turned to his host. He said, then you put on a luncheon or a banquet. He said, don't invite your friends. This is amazing. He said, don't invite your friends, brothers, relatives, or rich neighbors, for they will invite you back, and that will be your only reward. That will be your only reward, is the people you invite. The people who have wealth and power and all, that's your only reward. But he says this, instead, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. Then at the resurrection of the righteous, God will reward you for inviting those who could never, ever repay you. God's reward is always found when we become a people who serve through the lens of compassion and justice. If we have a sense of compassion and justice, we will always fall in line with the work of Jesus. So how do we do this? How do we build momentum moving forward? How do we build community? How do we fill these seats? How do we build relationships? How do we build life groups? How do we build a youth group and children's ministry? How do we build this community of faith to bring people to a relationship with Jesus? He gives us the answer in 15 through 18. He says, hearing this, a man sitting at the table with Jesus exclaimed, what a blessing it will be to attend the banquet in the kingdom of God. And Jesus replied with this story. A man prepared a great feast and sent out many invitations. And when the banquet was ready, he sent his servant to tell the guests, come, the banquet is ready. But they all began making excuses. Crazy. And one said, I have just bought a field and must inspect it. Please excuse me. So there's three things that we're going to find in this little passage. Our excuses are often going to sound like the excuses he gives here. I've got places to be, I got things to do, and I got people to see. I got places to be, I got things to do, and people to see. So he says, in verse 3, or let's see, where am I? The excuses that we make regarding becoming a more inclusive community here at Neighborhood Friends is literally those same exact things. We will often say, I got better things to do. I got bigger people to see. I got more opportunities than what's here for me. So in verse 19 it says, another said, I have just bought 5 pairs of oxen and I want to try them out. Please excuse me. That's his first fault, is that he didn't try out the oxen before he purchased them. That's like buying a car before you test drive it. Doesn't make sense, would it? Oh, I just bought a car. I need to go drive it. Sorry, I can't make it. Excuse me. We have things to do. So we have places to be and things to do, but the last says, another said, I just got married, so I can't come. How many of you know this is true? I got a wife. I got a relationship. I got somebody like, I just got married. I got to go home. Just got married. I got to go home. We have people to see. And verses 21 through 24, look what it says. The servant returned and told his master what they had said. And his master was furious, and he said, go quickly into the streets and the alleys. Listen to his response. Go into the streets. Go into the alleys. Go into the towns and invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. After the servant had done this, he reported, there is still room for more. Just look around. There's still room for more. And so his master said, go out into the country lanes and behind the hedges and urge anyone you find to come so that the house will be full. This one man yesterday said, I hope that my $1,000 will reach thousands. That's all I want. I want my $1,000 to reach and change thousands. If you want to be like Jesus, if you want to live like Jesus, you better eat with people and walk with people. And the people that we eat and walk with don't have to be the people that we like the most or like you the most. The best people that we can eat and walk with are the people who are very different from us. They don't see life the same way we do. They have different political perspectives and social agendas. They live in different parts of the country, maybe even the city. Like, that's okay. Neighborhood Friends doesn't have to just reach us here. We need to reach people everywhere. Jesus' greatest teachings were around this table. His theology was around, not books that you get at the Christian bookstore. In fact, out of the 23 parables that Jesus shared with people, 15 of them are sitting around a table. 15 of them around food and some sort of dinner party, So like Levi's house speaks about the theology of mission. Simon's house speaks of the theology of grace. His 5,000 members that he was preaching to, people that were seeking him, is the theology of evangelism, and it's around food and multiplying food. Martha and Mary is the theology of relationships. Scribes and Pharisees was around the theology of holiness, and it goes on and on and on. The dinner party and the table was where we have to return to our deepest level of faith. So when we come back to this place, it shouldn't just be coming here at 10:30 on Sundays. It should be coming here to say we are going to start getting together, being together, eating together, and inviting people around our tables. Christian theology is found in the art of table talk and party people. That's what it's around. Table talk and party people. I know my life group, my men's group, when we get together and have coffee, it always comes back to Jesus, doesn't it, Doug? Somehow, some way, we can be talking about guns and barbecues, hiking and mountain biking, and suddenly it comes back to Jesus. St. Augustine said this: Christ is the bread awaiting hunger. And I say this: Christ is the joy awaiting our party. That's what he's looking for. He's looking for our party. I'm going to invite the worship team back up. Because rather than us being a church that makes excuses not to be here or not to be with people or not to rub shoulders with people who are not like us, those excuses can become our excuse for ministry. They are the excuse for ministry. Excuse me, but I have church to do. Excuse me, but I have a ministry to be a part of. Excuse me, but I have a kingdom to help build. Excuse me, but I have a world in which I get to engage in to watch people's lives transformed. And here's why: because Jesus is here. And when the presence of Christ is in this place, this is the place to be. He's here. And when he's here, there will always be things for us to do. He's here. And when he is here, there's always going to be people that we can see and meet and invite, because transformation in their life is our most important goal, more than anything. Amen? Stand with us. We're going to sing together and close out our time together this morning. Man, it's been good to not talk to a phone. I am rusty. I'm feeling it. Like I'm just not myself right now. I think I need an iPhone or something. But pray for us. Pray for us as a leadership, as a team, and as a church, because over the last 14 weeks, we couldn't see people's faces. Over the last 14 weeks, we weren't sure who was watching, really. The last 14 weeks, we're not sure who was going to come back when we re-engage again. So there's a job for us to do. There's a church to build. There's a mission that God wants us to accomplish, and we get to do it together. I'm not doing this solo. I'm doing this with you. Amen? It's exciting to be back, and it's just going to get better and better and better each week.
Upon you and 1,000 generations and your family
what an amazing morning we've had together. It's been so good to be with you. This is your reminder that we are having a picnic outside. So please join us. Donnie's talking about, eating together and walking together and how we want to do that as a church and in our community. So let's start that this morning. Can't wait to see you out there. The Lord bless you and keep you. May his face shine upon you. May he be gracious to you and give you peace.